All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by Brian for Liberty. I appreciate your time. And please take a second and subscribe. I'm not going to build the social media empire I'm looking for without subscribers. So just take a quick second, hit that subscribe button. And if you really like the content, please take another second and share it. Today, we're going to be having a ton of fun, and we're going to be talking about why capitalism is absolutely failing in the United States of America. And we're going to be discussing whether or not that's an issue regarding free markets or if it's an issue that's unique to the United States and the way that we've transformed our capitalist system from a free market system into a massive crony capitalist system. Oops, I guess it just kind of gave away the end, didn't I? But the bottom line is we have to take a look at this and we have to understand why it's failing here. Yeah, why capitalism in particular is failing in the United States. And to me, personally, there are three reasons why this is happening. First and foremost is our banking system. Second is our regulatory environment. And third is just flat out corruption. We're going to go through each one of those things one by one. So let us get started. The banking system in our country encourages debt, punishes savers, and constantly devalues the dollar. So that it is incredibly difficult to get out of poverty in this country. And let's take a quick look at why that is. But be warned, it is incredibly complicated, like ridiculously complicated, like this complicated. The bottom line is you're required by law to accept US dollars as a means to pay debt, right? So if you have a business in this country, if you want to trade in this country, you have to be willing to accept dollars. Dollars are printed out of thin air and they're backed by nothing. They lose value over time, and that is an intentional act through the Federal Reserve's policy of inflation. So since the founding of the Federal Reserve, the dollar's purchasing power has absolutely collapsed. So in a capitalist system, the way that this whole thing works is you exchange, if you are a wage earner, you exchange your labor in exchange for dollars, right? But if the Federal Reserve is printing dollars out of thin air and the purchasing power of the dollar is collapsing, then your labor over time becomes worth less and less and less, and your purchasing power declines. While at the same time, your cost of living is rising. It takes more dollars, which means it takes more labor to survive. If you don't understand why that the dollar is collapsing, here's a quick look at the dollar's purchasing power since the founding of the Federal Reserve through today. Now, we're watching this happen. We're watching this keep going right now as we are printing money at a record pace in response to the coronavirus and what's going on in the world right now and the devastating impact it's having on our economy. But as your labor becomes worth less and less and your cost of living increases, what happens is it becomes harder and harder for you to save and invest your way into a higher income or into a higher economic position, and it becomes very difficult for you to pass wealth on. So lower class, people lower on the economic ladder, people at the lower end of the wage scale, it is very difficult for them to invest and save their way into a higher standard of living, and it's harder for their generationally to climb out of that. So that's how you end up with this long-term inequality that people are constantly talking about in this country, but it's not based on free market capitalist principles. One of the primary drivers behind that is the fact that the way that our currency system the way that our currency system functions. Oh my God. So while inequality is still rampant in this country, it's not based on the free market system that people will say it is. It's based on the fact that our currency system rewards people who borrow, people who have massive access to capital, and essentially punishes people who are in a situation where they are exchanging their labor in order to, or exchanging their labor for dollars. Those people are being punished. So if you borrow or you have access to capital, this is a great system for you because not only can you invest these dollars into assets that increase in dollar value over time, but because of inflation, you can inflate away the debt over time. So it becomes cheaper and cheaper for you to pay back the debt. But if you don't have access to these capital markets, well, then you're probably going to be stuck as a wage earner and your standard of living is going to fall. And the only way to keep it up, and this is very evident in the way that the American consumer functions, the only way to prevent that to prevent the fall in your standard of living is to borrow more money. So the entire system, our entire capitalist system in this country, is undermined by the fact that we have a fiat currency that's not based or not backed by an asset. And if we had a currency that was backed by an asset, what happens then is your labor has a consistent value. Your spending, your purchasing power has a consistent value, which allows you to save and invest and be able to count on your purchasing power later in life. This allows you to accumulate wealth without having to risk it in the marketplace, wherein you have to invest. The only way to beat out inflation right now is to buy hard assets with capital or to invest in the stock market and try and outrace inflation. But for many people, for a wage earner who is exchanging labor for dollars, that's a huge risk. Whereas the ability to invest and count on the purchasing power of those dollars that you're saving and that you're investing to be there for you tomorrow would be a huge advantage for people at the lower end. And at the higher end, it would make borrowing a much greater risk because you wouldn't be able to inflate away the debt. So the fact of the matter is that our currency system is a major hindrance to capitalism in this country. So what's the second thing? The second thing is over-regulation. Now, calm down, everybody. I know that when we talk about regulations, that any discussion about deregulating the economy in any way puts images of this in the progressive left's mind. Relax. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be Mad Max. It's not going to be business rolling all over people. Take a look at this. This is Donald Trump standing between a representation of the Code of Federal Regulations from 1960 on the left and 2017 on the right. From 1975, when we talk about overregulation, from 1975, the Code of Federal Regulations grew from 71,000 to 186,374 pages. That's almost 200,000 pages of regulations at the end of 2017. There is a massive amount of regulation in this economy, and it hurts. It hurts people bad. And every regulation is a roadblock for anyone with any level of entrepreneurial spirit. Anybody who's willing to risk that capital to get into business has to go through this massive wall of regulation. And one of the biggest lies that we've been told, one of the biggest things that we've ever been sold is that big business hates regulation. Big business loves regulation. Regulation protects big business from competition. It raises costs, which if you're Walmart, you don't mind the increase in costs. The increase in cost puts mom and pop out of business and centralizes the economy around big box retailers, big buyers who have massive purchasing power and the ability to pass their costs onto their suppliers and their consumers. Whereas the mom and pop store, well, you're just kind of out of luck. So despite the fact that the far left thinks that, if we deregulate, it's going to be Mad Max, on the other side is, of course, the right, who looks at any kind of regulation as this. Both of those things are false. We need some regulation. We should be protecting consumers against fraud, against bad actors. But the fact that we have almost 200,000 pages of federal regulation is absolutely insane. And keep in mind, that doesn't include all the regulations that it takes to start any kind of a business in your state. So that's just at the federal level. So this massive amount of regulation is a huge headwind to anybody who wants to try and become an entrepreneur, to try and open a business. And once again, it furthers and codifies almost in law that there's going to be this constant inequity between the incredibly wealthy and the lowest classes. As a libertarian, you may find this discussion of economic classes odd, but we have to keep in mind that we don't live in a free market environment. And I'm strongly opposed to the form of crony capitalism that we live in now. And that brings me to my third point. And this is maybe as important as the dollar situation. It's definitely right up there, and it is corruption. Corruption has destroyed the faith in the system itself. And for any economic or social order to survive in the long run, it must have the trust of the people. That has to exist. If you can't trust the system that you're living in, then you are going to revolt against it. And we're seeing that here in the United States. We're seeing a massive increase in calls for socialism. We're blaming capitalism which we do have a form of capitalism. It's crony capitalism, but we do have a form of capitalism, and it's being blamed for all the failures, all the inequities that we see in society today. And the fact of the matter is that the corruption that we have in this country is based on the fact that government is so massively involved in our economy. Calls to increase government power, calls to increase government encroachment into the economy are counter to the corruption that we're facing. It's almost as if there's a group who believes that while government is absolutely right in your face, accepting bribes from lobbyists and allowing lobbyists to literally write laws, that somehow creating an environment where there's more government is going to solve that problem. It's silly, it's counterintuitive, it's cognitive dissonance, whatever you want to call it. It's wrong. The corruption in this country is simply illegal, is lobbying. It's a legalized form of bribery. Any attempt to call it something else is disingenuous at best and a flat out lie at the worst. But also it's a flat out lie. People have virtually no faith in politicians. Here's a chart right here that shows the congressional approval rating. And in 2020, I think it's March of 2020, it shows that Congress had an approval rating of 30%, which means obviously 70% of people disapproved of the job that Congress is doing. And a 30% congressional approval rating is a massive victory for Congress. Okay, their approval ratings typically are single digits to 10 to 15%. So a 30% approval rating is amazing for Congress. 70% of people disapprove of the job their politicians are doing, but yet there's a massive portion of the population that still wants them to play an ever bigger role. We allowed all these regulations to happen. We allowed our currency to be debased. We allowed for this incredible government involvement in our economy, and we are going to blame capitalism. We're going to blame free markets for its failure, but it is absolutely the corruption. And the power that we've given government draws money. So the more powerful government becomes, the more appealing bribing government becomes, because the more favors they can grant. We keep going down this road of government growth, of government encroachment, and saying that this is the way to make the economy function for everybody. But in reality, we've seen what the results of growth of regulation have done. We've seen what the growth of the financialization of our economy has done, which has made borrowing and trading a more profitable endeavor than building and investing. So corruption, regulation, and a fiat currency have led to the absolute failure of capitalism in the United States. We are in what I believe is end stage capitalism right now. We are seeing trillions and trillions of dollars being created out of thin air in response to this crisis that we're currently working our way through. And I really think that we're going to come out of this with a new currency, probably digital. But when we look back, it's going to be very important to tell the story of how we destroyed a great free market system in the United States and turned it into a crony capitalist system. And that's why it failed, not because freedom failed, but because taking freedom away led us down this road of corruption. So I wanted to get that out today. I am going to get a podcast out here very shortly, just talking about the dollar and kind of the history of our currency in this country, how we got here. It's a very important thing for people to remember as we move into what I believe is going to be a new currency of some sort over the next several months. We have to remember that sound currency and sound money is a fundamental building block to a true free market economic system that works for everyone. So I'm going to be going over that on a podcast. I'm going to do everything I can to get it out this evening. I'm hoping it'll be there. It's Brian for Liberty on Spotify. That's Brian, the number 4 on Spotify. I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, please take a second again and subscribe and share it if you have the opportunity. And as always, we will see you next time.